Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm coming to y'all with episode 40, at least I think it's episode 40, of my inexpensive knife series. This one's on a Rough Rider. Now, I've done Rough Rider reviews before, and many of you guys may know Rough Rider as a brand. They are a very popular, affordable slip joint company for the most part. They make beautiful, high quality, but low priced classic knives. Toothpicks, trappers, stockmans, muskrats, elephant toenails, and the list goes on and on and on. Many people love to collect Rough Rider slip joints because they actually feel that they are better quality than some of the more expensive slip joints. I know a lot of collectors who actually will argue that Rough Rider knives are made with better fit and finish and better tolerances than many, not all, but many of the modern day case knives. A friend of mine, Chance Priest, is a custom knife maker, and this is, right now he's also getting into, I believe, the toy business in terms of, like, writing comics and making his own toys. But for a very long time, his profession was custom knife making, and he really enjoys Rough Rider knives for that reason. He'll swear up, down, left, and right that an average Rough Rider will tend to have better tolerances than an average case. Keep in mind, we're talking modern day cases and not the older stuff, which was made with much higher quality and better tolerances. Today, though, we're not looking at a slip joint. We're not looking at a classic knife. We're looking at the RR1822, and that is actually a tactical knife. Yep, that's right, Rough Rider makes more modern day designs. I didn't know about it either. This knife actually is not mine. It is a buddy of mine, my friend Hagen, who is also a housemate, roommate. He lives in the same room, the same house as I do. Different room, same house. He came home with this one day from work whenever a customer gave it to him. And he doesn't know much about knives. He pretty much comes to me whenever he wants information about what knife to buy. Right now he's carrying one of the Kershaw Emerson models he bought a couple years back, and it's been doing really well for him. And yes, I will review it in the future. But the guy came back and gave this to him, and, basically just told him he could have it. He came to me and asked me what I knew about the knife and the company. And I was really surprised. I had no idea that they made a knife like this. Went online, did a little digging. Turns out you can find them for about 13 or so bucks, which makes it a perfect candidate for the series. And I asked him if he'd let me carry and use it for a while, and he said yes. He doesn't like it as much as his Kershaw. So even though he's not a knife guy, he has, like many other just people with common sense, he's able to understand the differences between a really high quality folding knife for a low price and something a little bit lower end like this. Now, this Rough Rider is actually a pretty solid knife for the money, and if you don't have time to stick around for the whole review, I will tell you that I would buy this for the $13 price tag if you like what I'll have to say about it, but it's not without its own negatives as well. If I were to have had this about 7 or 8 years ago, I would have raved about how amazing this was. Because back then, Smith & Wesson's and the Schrade company, who was definitely a lot lower quality than they are now. They're both owned by Taylor brands, as far as I know. But those knives were kind of the quote-unquote high end of the series, alongside the venerable Sanren Moos, which blew them out of the water. But the Schrades and the Smith & Wessons were kind of like the end-all, be-all budget knives for a good beater and decent quality. This defeats the older Schrades and Smith & Wessons by a lot, but the competition is much more fierce these days. With Sanren Moos still making knives, Enlin making knives, Gonzo/Firebird making knives, the competition for a sub $15 folding knife is a lot fiercer than it once was. Can the Rough Rider hold up? Well, let's find out. I'll give you the specs first because you can just find those online, so if all you want to know is the information. It has a 3.5-inch blade made out of 440A. It is a clip point shape. We have a G10 handle, but it's not a textured G10, kind of a polished G10, as you can see there. So G10 handle that is 4.6 inches long, not a lot of traction on the handle. Alright, I do not know the weight offhand. I will eventually update the description on this video to show the weight. I haven't gotten a chance to weigh it yet. I don't have a personal scale to do so with. But check down the description every now and again. Eventually I'll post it there. So that's the specs on the knife. What do you really want to know about the knife, though? How does it perform? How comfortable is it? How well does it do? And that is what I'm here to tell you. I've carried this for a couple weeks now, and I've gotten some serious testing done on it. I've gone out of my way to break down cardboard boxes and do other cutting tasks just to test the overall quality of the blade and the steel. What I can tell you is that the 440A blade on this does a lot better than many other 440As that I've used. It really does. It actually did have some semblance of an edge after everything was said and done. It did need to be touched up, but I didn't actually have to sharpen it. I just honed it a little bit on a steel. You know, I went back and forth a couple times, and I was able to put a hair shaving sharp edge back on the knife within just a matter of, I'd say, a minute or so on the honing steel. So as far as a 440A blade goes, it is not the worst that I've used. It's probably actually one of the best 440As that I've gotten the chance to use personally. That being said, it did dull, of course. It dulled down a decent amount, had to be touched up, sharpened up really well. The 440A on here is highly rust resistant. I have not oiled this blade up or in any ways lubricated it to help fight rust, and I do live in a very humid environment here in Northeast Texas. No rust has formed on the blade. That is something that 440 is actually really good for. It is very rust resistant steel. You can see we have kind of a two-tone blade, and the coating on the blade held up pretty well through all that cardboard testing. You can see that the blade does that the coating does have some wear on it. But I've certainly used more expensive knives where the coating did not hold up nearly as well. A lot of Teflon finishes from older cold steel models, for example. So the blade overall, it did just fine. We have a hollow grind on it, and you guys know how I like that. Somewhat thick stock on this, so it did cleave through the cardboard a little more than it sliced, but it was a very capable blade for those utility tasks. A little bigger than I tend to like, but it does the job well. Lockup on this thing is solid as a rock. There is no play up and down. There is no play side to side, and I'm really rocking that knife. It is a bank vault. Honestly, the lockup is one of the biggest ups to this knife because I have used knives that are 3, 4, 5 times as expensive as this that did not lock up this solidly. And full disclosure, guys, you know I'm always real with you. I'm always honest with you. I haven't had a single SOG knife that locked up this well. Most of my Kershaw knives have not locked up this well. Some of the Redline Benchmade stuff that I've had has not locked up this well. So for a sub $15 knife, that lockup is awesome. And again, I did some pretty hard cutting with this. Did a lot of testing, and it did not loosen in the least bit. I have not had to play with that pivot point, though I could adjust it if I wanted to. One concern that I will have with this knife, being a somewhat cheaper blade, is that the hardware may not be the most durable or the best treated. So I would be careful to not strip the hardware if you do take this apart or need to adjust it. I can't speak and say that it actually has or would strip, but I have a lot of experience with knives around the same price point and general quality, and usually the hardware is what really takes a hit. They put a lot of effort in making the blade function and the handle comfortable and high quality, but they don't put a lot of attention to detail on the hardware. So be very careful if you do need to adjust your knife. The deployment speed is pretty adequate. You can see we have a flipper design here, and it flicks out nice and fast with the flipper and with the thumb stud, but there's a problem with deploying it via the thumb stud. You can see it right there. If you hold the knife in a typical grip and try to use the thumb stud, it is going to catch your finger. Now you can still push it out, but you're going to pinch the fat of your finger when you try to use those thumb studs unless you reposition your hand, deploy it, and then choke back up on the knife. Not a big deal, but it's something I wanted to note because many of us are used to grabbing our knives right around here and just trying to flick it open. If we look at the Spyderco Persistence, I just default to gripping that high on the knife so I can immediately go to work with the knife. Again, same thing with the Kershaw Nerve. Same thing with the Strade. Same thing with several other knives that I own, carry, and use. Because this flipper is so large, and it is extremely large, it does pinch your fingers if you don't position your hand the right way when using the thumb studs for deployment. Which, by the way, the thumb studs, very adequate, kind of a barrel shaped with a small notch cut into it. They do work fairly well. One big hit on this knife is the in-handle retention. It does not have the best in-handle retention that I've ever seen. In fact, it has some pretty mediocre. I'll see if I can show you on camera. There you go. I'm not flicking it that hard. If I got the Spyderco and did the same thing, I'm flicking this much harder. It's not coming out. The Kershaw, it's not coming out. The Schrade, it's not coming out. But the Rough Rider, yeah, it pops out pretty much every time because the in-handle retention is relatively poor on this knife, and that is an issue for me. I haven't yet had this thing pop open in the pocket, but because it is a tip-up carry, if you stick this in your pocket, you don't have it slid all the way over to the right-hand side. Okay, if you do, obviously if you have it over there, the blade won't open. But if you stick it in your pocket, somewhere near the middle of your pocket, and the blade opens up, when you reach in, you're going to stab yourself in the hand with that clip point blade. And that is a concern for me. The in-handle retention could be a lot better and might be a deal breaker for you because it means the knife is not guaranteed to stay closed in transit. That being said, we were talking about the pocket clip. It is a right-hand tip-up carry only. There are no holes drilled to reposition this, and it is a pretty goofy-looking clip, kind of fat, kind of beefy. But I'll go ahead and show you how it carries using cutlery lovers. You know, pocket idea. I stole this idea from him years and years ago, and I still try to use it. Forgot to do so with the squid. But if we put this knife in this pocket here, you can see how the knife carries. We have a decent amount hanging out so we can grab onto the knife. But not a ton. It's not a true deep carry clip, but it's deeper than most. If I compare this to the Spyderco Persistence again, you can see it buries just a tiny bit deeper than the Persistence. However, the clip does have one other issue, and that isn't the clip itself, but it's what the clip protrude, or what the clip, I guess, blocks. And that is the lanyard hole. The lanyard hole is interrupted by this clip, and you can see if we just look down the lanyard hole itself, that clip extends over the lanyard hole. This is a bit of a pain because the lanyard hole is already fairly small. It's not going to hold 550 cord easily, and now whatever you do put through there has to be forced in around this pocket clip, which isn't ideal because whenever you have a tip-up carry clip, especially one that buries kind of deep like this does, many people want a lanyard to use to grab onto it and withdraw the knife. And with this occluded lanyard hole, thanks to the pocket clip, it can be kind of difficult to do so with, and that is certainly a downside to this knife. Okay, not a huge deal for many of you, but it is something I wanted to mention. While I don't know the weight offhand, I can tell you the knife is relatively heavy. If you are a T&P'er or anyone who is weight conscious, you are not going to like the heft of this in your pocket. It is a thick and chunky knife with non-skeletonized steel liners, and as a result, it weighs a fairly decent amount. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say over 5 ounces. I don't know exactly. I'm not the best when it comes to guessing the weight on anything by the feel of it, but I'm going to assume that it is a 5 ounce plus knife, which is heavier than most folks I know want to carry. And again, those handle scales are very thick. We have very thick steel liners. We have the thick, somewhat thick G10 slabs. I do love the two-tone on there with the red and the black, by the way. But you can see how thick and chunky this knife really is. Let's go ahead and compare that to the Spyderco Persistence. Okay. You can see how much thicker it is there. How about the Kershaw Nerve? I know a lot of folks actually commented on how chunky this was whenever it had first come out. The late Boy Scout, I believe, called it a chunky knife. Pretty sure Nut and Fancy called it a chunky knife, and so did many other reviewers. Let's see how this stacks up. Yep, thicker than the Kershaw Nerve. How about the Martini Pelican? This is a thick, rubber-handled work knife. About the same thickness as this Martini Pelican. And this is what I consider like a Gerber Gator type knife. So that should give you an idea just how thick these handles, or this handle slab setup is. It is very, very robust. Now, if you like a, quote, overbuilt knife, or a heavy knife, or a chunky knife, this may be perfect for you. For me, it is a little on the hefty side, and I did notice that I had it. We have a liner lock setup with a decent engagement, and because of how thick those liners are, it definitely will not flex on you in hard use. Comfort in hand, it's a bit blocky. They could have rounded those corners just a bit better, but again, it's a sub $15 knife. So with all that being said and put into consideration, it is relatively comfortable. We have a decent thumb ramp, which allows us to get a pretty good grip on the knife when it comes to doing a push cut. It is more than adequate in that regard. don't really have too much to say about the knife. It is a pretty straightforward and simple design. I have no idea if Rough Rider came up with this themselves or if they stole the design from something. If this resembles a knife that you've seen before, please let me know, because I know that many companies like this will actually find a custom knife or a semi-custom knife and just rip off the design. Usually they'll go for something a little more obscure, so it's not super obvious. But as far as I know, the design is unique, so that is kind of an upside to the knife, I suppose. Don't have too much else to say, though. It is an adequate blade. It's not bad. But in this day and age, I feel like we can do better. I really do feel like we can do better for the money. It's not that this is a bad knife. It's just that there's better knives. You know, if you look at Gonzo's offerings, Gonzo, also known as Firebird, you can find many of their G10 axis lock knives for between $15 and $25. So what I consider in the same ballpark as this. About $17 seems to be the average for one of the Gonzo blades. And what do we get out of those? We get an axis lock setup. We have G10 handles on those. We have a 440C blade on those. And overall, just slightly better build quality. While this is fine, it isn't as nice or up to par as perhaps some other options or offerings from other companies may be. But at this point, I feel like I'm ranting and rambling. If you like the design on this knife, you can find them eBay, Smoky Mountain Knife Works, maybe Amazon.com. There's probably a lot of different places you can find this particular blade. I know I saw it on Smoky Mountain Knife Works for about 13 bucks. So if you really like this knife and you want to add it to your collection, you want a pretty decent beater knife, something you won't feel bad about throwing in the toolbox and just beating the hell out of, this is definitely perfect for that role. Okay? If you're looking for an everyday carry knife, you may want to go for something lighter and smaller, unless you like this size and weight. If you're looking for a budget self-defense knife, this definitely fits that role well. Good grip, nice finger guard thanks to that oversized flipper, good blade shape for general knife fighting uses. It will serve you in that role. But even there, you may be better suited by one of the Gonzo knives. So overall, decent blade, not an amazing blade, but for 13 or so bucks, nothing particularly wrong with it. So that has been my review of the Rough Rider 1822. If you guys like this video, comment down below, let me know what you guys want to see next. I will have a review coming out soon on this little Schrade SCH 303M. Excellent little everyday carry knife, as well as on the Martini Pelican, because I've been using this quite a bit here recently. So I'll crank those reviews out probably in the next month or two. But if you guys want to see more, comment down below and let me know. If you guys appreciate it and you enjoyed it, give it a like, a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'll see you later. Peace, and take care.